Has the Nigerian president delivered on his election promises? The first anniversary in office for Muhammadu Buhari is being accompanied by unrest in the Niger Delta. How will he deal with the threat and the many problems Nigerians face? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Martine. A year of triumph, consolidation, pains and achievements. That's how Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari described his first year in office. He marked the anniversary on Sunday with a speech promising to build roads and bridges and eliminate corruption, to defeat Boko Haram and to boost the economy. Well, these are pledges he made in his campaign for the top job in Abuja. So has he delivered? Ahmed Idris sets up the story for us from the southern city of Warri in Delta State.
Doing business only got tougher for Benaya. His bakery struggles to stay afloat because of mounting costs and reduced production.
One of the serious areas that is really affecting us is the area of power. We have to run this place almost 24 hours with generator.
For many Nigerians, incomes have either dropped or are being consumed by inflation or the high cost of production.
In 1953,
President Muhammadu Buhari came to office promising a wide range of reforms, from tackling unemployment to fighting corruption and crushing Boko Haram, the rebel group that controlled significant chunks of Nigerian territory and was responsible for tens of thousands of deaths. In 1 year, his military regained control of several territories occupied by the fighters. But the tough-talking former general's success has been tempered by the group's capability to launch attacks against soft targets, and the attacks on oil and gas installations by militants crippling production in the Delta.
Muhammadu Buhari came to power on a wave of goodwill. 1 year on, some of his supporters are running out of patience. The hike in petrol prices in particular was hugely unpopular, but the government defended it to end the punishing shortages. The biggest challenge before the government now is the shortfall in oil revenues because of falling prices worldwide.
There are also concerns about missed opportunities.
A lot of decisions that could have been taken early in the life of the government was not taken. The whole challenge of devaluation of the naira, or ensuring that you had adequate management of the foreign exchange regime. The government did not tackle this. The issue of deregulation of the downstream oil sector could have been done quite early in the life of the administration. This was not done.
Buhari is going after some powerful individuals who have stolen the country's wealth. In doing this, he has endeared himself to many and angered some. And his government can still count on some popular goodwill.
The expectation we all have been hoping up to are yet to be met.
So I think he's just doing his best. Everybody has their own strategy or their own way of doing things.
What is not certain, however, is whether there will be much goodwill left if the government fails to deliver on its promises. Ahmed Idris, Al Jazeera, Warri, Nigeria.
Well, let's introduce our panel now. Joining us from London is the Nigerian journalist Donu Kogbara, who was a member of the Presidential Committee on Oil and Gas. From Abuja, Nigeria's Minister for Information, Mohammed. Also in London is Manji Cheto, a Nigerian security consultant and political risk analyst. Can I start with you, Minister, in Abuja, and thank you very much for joining us. It's been a tough year. President Buhari admitted as much. But there have been, on the positive side, there have been some achievements by your government that have been hailed, particularly by the international community, notably the war against corruption, which is sending all the right messages. And, of course, there is the war against Boko Haram, which has seen some significant achievements as well. What regrets do you have from the first year of being in office?
Well, the first year in office has been quite challenging. The major challenges we faced was that we inherited a near failed state. We inherited a comatose economy. We inherited an empty purse. And we had within the last 12 months to try and survive under these very difficult situations. But we remain focused, we remain on track all through, despite the fact that on assumption of office, we lost over 70% of our total earning, due largely to the crash in the price of crude. But more importantly was that we found out to our chagrin that despite the almost 5 years of high price of crude, there was little in terms of infrastructure. We met refineries that were not working. We met roads that were in very great state of disrepair. But we rolled up our sleeves and we started addressing the issues. And the first thing we did was that we changed the lifestyle and we stopped any extravagant spending. We introduced the Treasury single account, which made it possible for government to ensure that all money according to government was in an account which the government could supervise. We introduced discipline and efficiency into government. We're able to weed out many.
Minister, can I just interrupt you there, Minister? Because what I actually want to get from you is a reflection, perhaps, on the past year, and as to whether there's anything you think you could have done better.
Well, I don't think, given the circumstances, we could have done anything better. I know that people say we ought on day one to have, deregulated or liberalized the downstream sector of the oil industry. But for a politician, that would have been suicidal on day one, because you can imagine you are voted into power, high expectation, and the first step you are going to take is what is going to really inflict a lot of hardship on the people without even first understanding what the alternative is.
I think we've got a picture. Minister, I think we've got a picture of the dire situation that you inherited a year ago. Manji Cheto in London, can I go to you? And rather than go through the list of failings that many people accuse the Buhari government of in its first year, can we look at what challenges lie ahead, the challenges for the next year in office?
Well, I mean, I think the most obvious one, as the Honourable Minister mentioned, is the economy. Unfortunately, if I had to answer that question, what could the government have done better? I think certainly focusing on the economy would have been the right, position to take. And I think on delayed decisions that they have taken has pretty much exacerbated Nigeria's economic crisis.
Okay, and what will constitute? Okay, but what will constitute the greatest challenge, do you think, for the forthcoming year?
Well, forthcoming, I think, it's security in the Niger Delta, and that has a direct impact on the economy because, while the government has obviously said they want to diversify the economy away from the oil sector, at the end of the day, government revenues rely significantly on the oil sector. We now have a security challenge cropping up there. That's going to have an impact on the economy. So I think that's the biggest problem going forward that the Buhari government will have.
That's a question I now want to put to you, Donu, also in London. Management of the economy, of course, is the major overlying issue for any government in Nigeria, but it is particularly this security challenge that I want to ask you about, because, of course, you've got personal knowledge of it.
Yes, well, I hope the only thing I'm not famous for when I'm dead is the fact that I was kidnapped last year by Niger Delta militants in the creeks around Port Harcourt. So I do have personal knowledge of this. I spent 2 weeks with Niger Delta boys, if you like, who had become militants because of their numerous grievances against the system. And they had all been involved in pipeline vandalization, and they graduated to kidnapping. And the situation actually has been getting steadily worse for the past few months. One thing I will say for President Jonathan is that even though he did leave us with a pretty bad situation in terms of a state that was clearly failing, while he was in charge, the militancy in the Niger Delta seems to have been under control to some extent. but that is not the case.
All right,
now.
let's leave it there for now because we'll want to return to this in just a minute. First of all, let's just explain a little bit more about this situation in this vital region, the Niger Delta. Now, President Buhari inherited many problems, as we've heard, from the previous government when he took over a year ago. But since then, this represents a new threat, and that's emerged, and it's attacking the very heart of the Nigerian economy. The Niger Delta Avengers, as you've heard Donu refer to, are an armed group operating in southern Nigeria. It's home to most of Nigeria's oil and gas fields, and these Avengers have been sabotaging pipelines there, among other things. They want more of the national oil revenue to benefit people living in the poor and polluted Delta region. They say they'll continue to attack until their demands are met, and their attacks have already helped to cut oil production by 50%. That's potentially disastrous for an economy which, as we all know, relies very heavily on its oil revenue. And so, Minister Lai Mohammed in Abuja, can I ask you then, what is the government's strategy for dealing with this threat? As we've outlined, the capacity to reduce oil production goes to the heart of your country's economy and indeed of the health of your government.
Well, I don't think any decent government will allow itself to be held ransom by any group of people. We will continue to engage with the leadership, the leaders of that community, but we will not succumb to any blackmail. We are starting the cleanup of the Ogoni land on the 2nd of June this year. We will continue to look at what would make us be able to have a sustainable growth and a sustainable economy in Niger Delta. When necessary, we are going to engage people in discussion and negotiation, but we'll also go after the criminals. OK,
because I'm specifically interested, because up until now, President Buhari hasn't indicated that he's particularly interested in dialogue with any groups who've got a problem with central government. He's, it seemed, preferred a military option. I'm just wondering how he proposes to deal with the militancy in the Niger Delta, because, of course, this will define his presidency.
I'm afraid that President Buhari has never ruled out, engagement or negotiation. And I can tell you that we have been doing that, but we will do that with the leaders. And many of them have proven to be very reasonable. And in recent time, you can see many of these leaders denouncing the counterproductive methods of the militants. Because you see, in the first instance, you cannot, in one breath, claim to be protecting and fighting for the interests of the Niger Deltans, and at the same time taking actions that will affect the Niger Deltans even more. All this blowing up of pipelines and depriving the country of revenue, depriving the country of light. But what about the bigger implication? What are the bigger consequences, which is going to be more lasting, which is the despoliation of the flora and fauna? I think that we've always said it, that there are more decent manners to engage government and to put across your complaints.
OK. Donu, coming back to you with your personal knowledge of these guys who call themselves the Avengers in the Niger Delta, from what you've heard the minister say, will that be enough to satisfy them?
Well, I don't have personal knowledge of the Niger Delta Avengers per se. There are several groups. There have been several groups, similar groups, in recent years. I have personal knowledge of a particular subsection of a particular group that kidnapped me last year. But what I would say about the current situation is that while I understand President Buhari's refusal to regard these people as romantic, almost romantic freedom fighters, and his reluctance to negotiate with them or talk to them, I'm just very, very worried that the government can't actually handle this situation without some kind of dialogue. As Tony Blair said when he was Prime Minister of Britain, you have to be tough on crime, but you also have to be tough on the causes of crime, by which he meant that you have to focus on dealing with the problems that generated criminal activity. And I think that President Buhari has to tread very, very carefully. Yesterday and the day before, there were military actions in Maramatu Kingdom in Delta State. where soft targets like ordinary village people were brutalized allegedly by the army. I can understand the army wanting to storm communities to try and root out criminal elements and militants and people who are having such a terrible impact on the Nigerian economy. But, you know, I don't think this is going to work.
Okay.
And I'm also, you know, I'm sorry, Martine. I just want to say that I just wonder whether the Nigerian army and navy and police have the capacity to deal with this problem in a strictly militaristic way.
Manji, I can see you shaking your head. Can you just briefly outline for us what your thoughts are about the original causes of this? Because, of course, conflict in the Niger Delta has been going on since the 90s, most famously, of course, culminating, one episode culminating in the execution of Ken Saro-Wiwa. Remind us of what the situation is like in the Niger Delta and why so many people feel like taking up arms and sabotaging pipes and kidnapping and all sorts of other nefarious acts.
Well, I mean, I think one of the key arguments of the, Niger Delta in general, not just the militants, was that they have pretty much contributed a significant proportion to Nigeria's economic growth. And yet when you go to the region, there's virtually, I mean, infrastructure is non-existent. People's livelihoods have been completely destroyed as a consequence of oil production. The waterways are polluted. The environment, quite more generally, is polluted. And I think the government's response, unfortunately, to such grievances has been to pursue military action, which again and again it has shown that it has not provided any kind of reprieve to the situation. And I think the big problem that the Buhari government is actually facing now is one of a legitimacy crisis in the Niger Delta. As we know, Buhari has not actually yet visited the region, has not yet outlined plans of infrastructure development in the region specifically. I mean, the government has obviously committed to building infrastructure across the country. But I mean, I think given the contribution of the Niger Delta, we have to accept that there is a legitimate grievance there. There's an element of criminality that needs to get, addressed. But those elements are so few. But broadly, I think the Niger Delta does have a case in this situation, and I think the government's refusal to acknowledge that is obviously quite problematic.
So, Minister, when is President Buhari likely to visit the Niger Delta?
I think before I answer that question, it's not quite correct to say that the government of Nigeria has failed to address the issues of the lack of infrastructure in the Niger Delta. You will remember that as far back as 1999, in recognition of the contribution of the Niger Delta area to the economy of Nigeria, a special 13% derivative fund was, made a law. It was made into law. In other words, over and above everything before the federation account before money accrued federation account was distributed, 13% of that was given to oil-producing areas. So I think it's not correct to say that the federal government's response to the challenges of infrastructural deficit in the Niger Delta has been to engage in military tactics. Secondly, like I said earlier today, the president is supposed to launch the cleanup of Ogoni land in line with the United Nations Environmental Program report on the 2nd of June. So it is not really correct to say that the Niger Delta has been neglected while other areas of the country have been favored.
And Donu, so from what you're hearing from Minister Lai Mohammed, do you think that will satisfy what has become an almost constant restive region? I've actually been there. I've seen some of the contamination where waters are murky, completely unfishable. I've seen water that is supposed to be for drinking that actually smells of petrol. I mean, I've seen some of it, just a little bit of the kinds of after effects of the oil industry operating in this region.
Well, you're totally right. The situation is unacceptable. The environmental disaster is just widespread. However, President Buhari must be given credit for the fact that he is flagging up the launch of an environmental remediation program that's in conjunction with the United Nations on June the 2nd. I'm from Ogoni myself, and I'm very grateful for that. Because when Jonathan was president, even though he comes from the Niger Delta, he did absolutely nothing about the environmental crisis in Ogoniland. So kudos to Buhari for doing that. However, it goes beyond Ogonis. We are just one small group in a much wider region. And I think Buhari really, really has to sort of deploy the personal touch where the Niger Delta is concerned. Because he didn't win any seats or states in the South-South or the Southeast where, you know, the oil is. And so he doesn't have much political or any political, no, let's just say his political support in the Niger Delta is extremely limited, and he really needs to win some hearts and minds. He needs to go out there, he needs to travel around, he needs to show that he cares, because if he doesn't, I'm very, very worried about how the region will respond to his regime.
OK,
I agree with...
let's put that to the Minister then, Donu, shall we? Minister, as Donu's outlined her fears, her concerns about the possibility of perhaps the legitimate concerns of many people living in the Niger Delta perhaps being hijacked by other political parties.
Well, I think the issue is not about legitimacy. You talk about legitimacy when a government does not win elections free and fair. Well, we did win this election free and fair, and any part of the country has the right to give its support or its vote to any candidate. And I don't think the president has, either through his body language or by any action, or the government itself really been acting as if the South-South and Southeast will not be given adequate attention. So I think it's a misconception that the president has not visited the Southeast, he has not visited the South-Side. He has not visited the Southwest either, except when I think he went to commemorate the 40th anniversary of Ogun State. He has not paid any state visit to the Southwest. So it's not really correct for anybody to say, oh, Mr. President is ignoring the South-South or the Southeast. I'm a member of the cabinet, and I know that all through our deliberations, since I became a minister, we've not only treated every part of the country equally, we've even paid more attention to issues affecting infrastructural deficit in the South-South and the Southeast.
OK, Manji, we've got the lowest economic growth rates for, 25 years. As we've outlined, oil production is down to the lowest in 20 years or so. We've got inflation, we've got unpaid wages for public sector workers. How much time do you think, how much patience do you think Nigerians have? How much time will they give the Buhari government to turn things around?
Well, I think some of that patience has definitely been running out. What President Buhari is very lucky about it is that I think his support in the north, rightly so, is incredibly high. I mean, at the end of the day, this government has made a significant contribution to the turnaround of the security situation in the north. So I think the fact that they do have a lot of legitimacy there will continue to, I think that will remain in their favour for a little while. But unfortunately, I have to disagree with the minister here that, the president has not necessarily neglected the southeast and the south-south, because while he may not have visited the southwest, everyone knows that the southwest Nigeria is the most economically powerful part of the country. So, why give attention to a part of the country that does not necessarily need that attention, where the part of the country that is contributing significantly to government revenues, there is, again, people saying very openly, this is a president who demonstrates by his rhetoric that he does not care. I think to simply dismiss that and say, well, that's not true, I think, again, shows a sort of disconnect with people's sentiments. Whether the president feels that he is committed to it, the fact that people in the region are saying, well, you're not committed to us, I think is enough reason for him to stop and think, maybe I should be going out to the region as early as next week. OK, thank you very much indeed. Manji Cheto in London, Minister Lai Mohammed in Abuja, and Donu Kogbara also in London. Thank you all very much. And of course, thank you for watching. You can see the programme again anytime you like by going to the aljazeera.com website. For more discussion, should you want it, go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/AJ
AJ Inside Story. And there's always the Twitter sphere. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Martine Dennis, and the whole team here in Doha, it's bye for now.